Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's webinar, launching Lintstock's most recent research produced in partnership with the 30% Club, entitled Evidencing the Contribution of Gender Balance to Board Effectiveness. We're absolutely delighted with the response to this study. Well over 200 of you are dialing in for the presentation this morning. So thank you very much for your engagement. Before we go any further, Kate and I will introduce ourselves. My name is Neil Alderton. I'm a partner here at Lintstock, and for the last decade or so, I've worked on board evaluations internationally across listed, private, and not-for-profit organisations. I have a particular interest in developing the Lintstock Governance Index, which is our data and research arm. So I'm really excited to be using data to fuel discussions about diversity and to expand our understanding of this important topic.
I'm Kate Barclay. I'm an associate at Lintstock and have been working on board evaluations and board development for the last 3 years. And through this research, I've been really interested to learn more about how each and every director's experience base shapes their contribution to the dynamics and oversight of the board.
Great, thanks, Kate. So before we get stuck in, I'll briefly describe how we're going to structure today's session, which will last just short of an hour. To kick off, I'm going to talk to you about the aims of our research and the data behind it. Kate will then run through the key findings, so you'll be in the know about the very latest research into gender balance on boards. And then we'll hand over to our panel, who are going to discuss the implications of the research and share some of their knowledge and experience on the subject. We're really privileged to have such a high-profile, experienced panel this morning, so I think we're all in for a real treat. The 30% Club have been a fantastic partner for this research, and I'm very happy that Pavita Cooper, their vice chair, is joining us on the panel this morning. Alongside her, we have Sir Douglas Flint, Denise Wilson, and Yasmin Chinwala, who will chair the discussion, and we'll introduce them fully later on. So firstly, to kick off, a little bit of background. For those of you who don't know us already, Lintstock is an advisory firm specialising in board evaluations founded back in 2002. We're the leading provider of board evaluations in the FTSE and are becoming increasingly international, so much so that we now have over 120 retained clients across 5 continents. As a reviewer of board effectiveness, we have an intuitive feel for the benefits of gender balance, but actual data detailing its influence on board dynamics is almost non-existent. However, we recognise that we're uniquely placed to observe trends and patterns across a statistically significant number of organisations. So we decided to take up the challenge of actually evidencing that gender balance isn't only a question of fair representation, it's also a matter of effectiveness. Now, it's fair to say that diversity campaigns like the 30% Club and the FTSE Women Leaders Review are helping to deliver broader representation. And directors are definitely increasingly attuned to expectations in this area. Board diversity is the 3rd most improved metric in the last couple of years across the boards that we evaluate. And the FTSE Women Leaders Review recently published a report which found that women now occupy 40% of board roles at FTSE 350 companies. So boards have certainly come an awfully long way. However, we've spoken to some directors who are frustrated with the way in which quotas prioritise certain characteristics like gender or race and use those as a proxy for diversity of thought. So we set out to actually evidence precisely this link, i.e. the link between gender balance and diversity of thinking and ultimately overall effectiveness. That's because we believe there will only be equality in the boardroom if broad representation is allied with a genuine appreciation of how a more diverse board generates superior performance. This research isn't about peddling old stereotypes or generating new ones. we want to fuel the discussion about gender balance with data. That's why we set out to construct an analysis underpinned by real information rather than anecdote. Before Kate talks you through the key findings, I'll briefly tell you about the engine behind the research, which is a tool called the Lintstock Governance Index. We built the index to track over 60 board performance metrics across the many hundreds of board evaluations that we've conducted as a firm. The 60 odd metrics are grouped into 6 themes that you can see on the slide here. And we use the index to understand and compare the strengths and weaknesses of boards. All of our clients receive an analysis of their board relative to our index, and it has become an invaluable tool to bring our evaluations to life. The index also continually feeds our research function with insight into developing trends. And this morning's presentation is just one example of the type of research the index helps us generate. We're actually already working on our next study, which scrutinizes the practical implications of the COVID crisis and the war in Ukraine for boards, and that's due to be presented at the House of Commons in October. But for this piece of research, we used our index to conduct 2 phases of analysis on 100 recent board evaluations in the FTSE. So the first phase of analysis was to compare the ratings provided by male and female directors across all of the 60 board performance metrics that we track. And then the second phase was a detailed analysis of male and female directors' written commentary and feedback across all of those same themes. Now, I'm sure you're eager to discover what we found, so I'll now hand over to Kate, who will talk us through the headlines.
Thanks. So I'll start by looking at the first phase of analysis that we conducted, where we scrutinised the ratings provided by male and female directors. And the graph on the slide here shows the 60 board performance metrics that we track, ordered from highest to lowest. For each metric, we've split out the ratings provided by male and female directors to analyse any differences. Now, the first thing to note is that male and female directors' ratings of board performance are broadly similar for the majority of metrics, demonstrating that there is a high degree of consensus across boards as to what their key strengths and weaknesses are. However, it's also noteworthy that on average, female directors tend to award a broader spread of ratings and tend to be slightly more critical than their male counterparts. The table showing the metrics with the highest discrepancy between rankings highlights some interesting points. So if we just pause here and show you what we're looking at, let's go through a few of the individual metrics in detail. So looking firstly at areas ranked significantly higher by male directors, which is shown down in the left-hand table in purple, the adequacy of the HR function, metric 58, is one of the lower rated metrics in our index overall, but it's noteworthy that male directors tend to be significantly more positive about the HR function than their female counterparts. Male directors are also considerably more positive about 2 key aspects of strategy, the clarity of the strategic plan and the quality of the board strategy day. And I'll comment further on HR and strategy in a couple of minutes. And now let's look at areas ranked higher by female directors on the right in green. The knowledge of regulation is one of the highest rated areas by both male and female board members. But it's interesting that women are significantly more confident in the board's understanding of the regulatory environment, which is metric number 17. Women are also more complimentary about a couple of key aspects of meeting management. So as you can see from metric 37, the length of the board packs, and metric 22, which is the duration of board meetings. And so in our second phase of analysis, we dug into the substance of male and female director feedback in each of the key themes. And I think this has generated the most interesting findings. So on expertise and insight, we found that male directors are more likely to raise the issue of gender balance at board level, whereas female directors are more sensitive to diversity in other areas, like age, culture, and social background. And notably, women are 3 times more likely to recommend greater ethnic diversity. Female directors were also 50% more likely to serve as a designated non-executive for workforce engagement, and were more than twice as supportive of employee engagement initiatives. So it was showing a greater inclination to understand how these operate and the learnings that the board can draw from them. And on dynamics and focus, we found that male directors were more likely to have a financial background, and their input is unsurprisingly focused more on the numbers. Whereas women were more challenging on non-financial information and metrics and the enablers of performance, like people development, culture, customer focus, as well as the wider operating environment. And on information and support, we saw earlier that women are more complimentary about how boards are run. So they're more prepared to have longer meetings and to read longer board packs. Women also stressed the value that the company secretariat bring to board governance, but they were more than 3 times as likely to recommend further investment in this area. We also found that female directors were more likely to prioritize hiring specific skills through non-executive appointments, whereas men were more comfortable with the generalist approach, and they were far more likely to request formal board learning and training sessions for the existing directors. And when commenting on strategy and implementation, both men and women felt the board spend insufficient time on strategy. But as I highlighted earlier, men were significantly more positive about a few key enablers, including the clarity of the strategic plan and the quality of the board strategy day. Through their engagement, it was notable that men devoted greater attention to more granular aspects of business and financial performance, including comparisons relative to the peer group. Whereas women drove a more macro focus, they were twice as likely to demand greater focus on external context and big picture strategy. And as noted earlier, they showed greater interest in the enablers of performance, like people and culture. Women were also over 50% more inclined than men to raise ESG performance as an area for improvement in this area. Now, on risk and control, women were more critical about the board's oversight of key risks in general. And this greater focus of women on potential threats supports a growing body of research that gender diversity on boards has a positive impact on risk management. And last but not least, on people and succession, we found that women were twice as likely to identify the need to focus on people development and succession plans for specific positions, as well as the need to improve the diversity of the workforce. Whereas men felt more comfortable in general with leaving this in the domain of the executive. This discrepancy might be explained by a greater level of trust male directors often have in company HR functions, as we highlighted earlier on. Whereas for women, the adequacy of the HR function was the lowest rated metric. Now, these are just the headlines from a very detailed piece of research undertaken by our team, and I'd encourage you all to read through the full report, which can be found at lintstock.com/genderstudy. I think you'll agree that the research highlights lots of interesting insights, and what stands out is that in many cases, the contribution of male and female directors complement each other, and the best boards will benefit from a balance of both of these perspectives.